You're listening to Talk to My Angels with Seph Dietlin and Angel Channel. To join the Great Awakening, expand your awareness, and hear angelic guidance and divine wisdom that comes from a higher frequency, keep listening. Seph will be answering your questions and relaying powerful guidance to help you connect to your highest self. Without further ado, here's Seph.
Welcome to episode 1, The Hero's Journey, and I am your host, Seph Dietlin, and I'm here with Brent Harvey today. How this episode gets a little bit set up here is 2 decades ago, when I started communicating with the angels and downloading a lot that they had to say about transformation, I woke up one morning and I heard a message from the angels that said, go to film school. I went that day and I signed up to go to film school. Everything fell into place, of course, because that's how the angels work. They give you guidance when it's time to do that. Now, as I studied film and storytelling through film school, I ended up getting cast in people's projects, and that's where I discovered my ability as an actor as well. So then I started discovering acting as well. So that's how I met Brent. Brent is one of my acting teachers that I became friends with. And what we're here to talk about today is the hero's journey, because when I studied script writing, one of the things that I had an aha moment in is that I realized that story structure mirrors life. And thus, if you think about rewinding back to when storytelling was something that the shamans did as a sort of a spiritual activity to paint a picture for the ancient people about what was important in life, you can see where that structure reverberates patterns in life. And so thus it's really meant to do the same thing here. So, for example, when we see Spider-Man, at the depth of despair, we know that he's going to make it out of whatever circumstances he's wound up in. And yet at the same time, when we ourselves wind up in those same circumstances, we have less faith in ourselves than what we're watching, which is the purpose of how our consciousness is curious towards the art of story. So welcome, Brent. And for those of you watching the YouTube version, Brent brought with him more beautiful scenery that I was able to bring today. So I appreciate the gift of you and the gift of your scenery. So everybody just look over there. So Brent.
There you go. Thanks for having me, man. I'm proud of you. Like this, a lot of people talk about doing, anything. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to write a script. I'm going to move to LA or New York and become an actor. And I know you've been putting in a lot to get this thing going, and you did it in a relatively short period of time. You said, I'm going to commit to this, and you've been grind away. So, I'm proud of you. Because most people don't even show up. So, I'm grateful to be your first guest on this.
Thank you. Yeah, and the reason why, of course, is you brought an aspect of this to me, but you also bring an aspect of this to actors that you train as well. And whether our listener today wants to tell stories as an author or as an actor, I still highly recommend that people take an acting class of some sort, because it's great for spiritual development. It's great to activate creativity inside. And if you think about it, I didn't plan on bringing this part up, but I'm getting chills up and down my spine when I think about that. See, we're pure consciousness that comes from, let's say, a different place. And what do we do when we're in this journey in a body? We are an actor to a certain degree.
Well, yeah. I love Alan Watts when he talks about this, and he says that you got to think of it like this, like our consciousness, like he goes, think about it like this. And I'm going to screw this up. I'm not as eloquent as Alan Watts, but you can pull it up on YouTube. It's a great lecture. But he says, actors go on stage and they present a character and everything, and their job is to believe it so much that it becomes real to themselves and therefore the audience. He goes, being a human being is the same thing. right? And he said, at the end of the play, the curtain comes down, the audience applauds, and the play is over. And he said the thing about us being humans is that we are actors playing a role, but we're doing it so well that we've forgotten that to play. And when we die, the curtain's going to come down, the applause is going to happen. We're going to go, oh, right, this was all just for fun. So it absolutely is. And what I love about the thought of everybody taking an acting class, whether you want to be an actor or not, it's really the whole thing of, if anything, man, just for the human race, it creates empathy, because then you get to see or step into somebody else's shoes and understand where they're coming from, and realize, the bad guy isn't all bad and the good guy isn't all good. It's not like when we're kids, there's this black and white, like he's the bad guy, he's the good guy. As you get older, you start to realize, man, it's really mucky and gray, and it's really all about perspective, and everybody's flawed. So with acting class, like when I'm teaching, I'm like, the students are like, oh, I'm the bad guy, or I'm the bitch or whatever, and I'm like, you can't do that, because if you judge them, you can't understand them. And that's what we do in day-to-day life. We judge people, and therefore eliminate the possibility to understand them and realize we're actually not that far apart.
It's true, and there is a lot to learn when we learn to do anything creative, whether it's cooking or painting or gardening or anything like that. And there's something also in another level when we're learning to tell story. And when we're learning to tell story, very often there's something innate in us that wants to convey a message. And usually that message is hopeful, it's inspiring. And usually what I find that a lot of storytellers are inspired by, of course, is the desire to pick humanity up and say, you got this, because we always forget when we're in that space. I call it Act Two, because this is particular to writing a feature film, but the hero's journey is broken up into 3 acts, and the first act is setting up the circumstance. The second act is the challenge, which is actually the largest part of the film, and the third part is the result. So when we're in our second act, very often we don't realize how this is going to happen, but as a storyteller, we get an insight about something, or we create characters that will overcome their obstacles. And very often we're compelled by the need or the want to help humanity understand that whatever they're struggling with. How many times do we ever watch a film and we watch our character overcoming an obstacle that's somewhat similar or very similar to something that we're in the middle of, and we go, oh my gosh, we leave the movie theater, we're like, oh my gosh, I got this.
Well, no, absolutely.
And the minute that we go, I got this, our minds expand, and then all of a sudden stream of consciousness starts to speak to us, or ideas come to us and all that. So let's talk about the hero's journey, because there are steps to the hero's journey, a few very key ones. One of them is also our spiritual guidance, but there is we start off in the ordinary world, and then.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it step by step, but it's really, the gist of it is, you start off in what is called the ordinary world, or status quo, which is where you're at right now. You're who you are right now in this moment. And then the call to action happens, which could be anything. And typically it's not voluntary. If you look at stories, the thing that pushes your hero onto their journey, it's not voluntary. And if it seems voluntary, it's because they assume it's something else. Hey, I need you to take this milk and go to the grocery store. Oh, okay, I'll do that. But then that starts a cycle, a series of, are you hearing this rain?
The rain?
Yeah. It's all of a sudden it's come down. Anyways, if it gets too loud, let me know. I can move.
I can't hear it, but do you know what's really weird?
Okay,
when we do these programs like this, a lot of times the audience, what's interesting is they'll hear that and they'll resonate with the sound for whatever. So we got to let the universe do its thing, right? Which is, yeah, I mean, I watched one where there was the donkeys in the background and they were going and everybody was like, oh gosh, those donkeys were really beautiful. But anyways, continue.
Hey, pause for 1 second. I'm sorry.
And as Brent goes to check what he's checking here, what this does is it does replicate a cycle that we experience, which is why we can relate to the telling of story, or why we watch story and we can see ourselves in the characters and the circumstances. And as we see ourselves in the characters and circumstances, it can often lead us, guide us, and inspire us. So go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, here's the deal. Like you talked about, like you watch a octopus and the hero does something, you go, oh my God, I can do this. It's not because you beat Dr. Octopus or saved everybody from the terrorists. It's because you understand what it's like to be pushed up against something, a challenge, and having to overcome it and having to change. And so the hero's journey, if you really look at it, Joseph Campbell spent his life reading, dissecting, breaking apart stories from all throughout history, different genres, different periods, Greek mythology, all that. And what he realized, and that's why his book's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, because he's like, there's only one story ever told. And it's just told differently, meaning that it's told through different circumstances, if you will. But really, it's all the same pattern, the hero's journey, and which he realized is also, and as what you're talking about, is we go through that in our own lives. Like, and that's why we relate to it and we go, oh, I feel, we go through that experience in a movie or TV show and we go, it fires us up because we're like, we've been through that before. And we go through a hero's journey every day, every week, every month, every year. I mean, look at what we're going through right now, just as global, right? January 1st, 2020, right? We were all like, oh, this is going to be a great year and everything. By March, which is a third of the, or a quarter of the way in, things changed. But now if you look at it, people, even though there was, conflict and everything, call to action.
There's the March, the call to action.
Now, if you look at us now at the end of 2020, December 2020, everybody's changed. They've had to overcome things, living, being in the house by themselves. We've seen a lot of marriages fall apart. We've seen there's going to be a lot of babies born, things like that. Like everything has changed. And if you think about it, every day that you get up and you enter into the world, you start a hero's journey because you're not the same person you were at the end of the day as the person you were when you started. And sometimes it's massive. It's a massive, and you're just like, oh my God, like I learned so much today, or I, grew so much or whatever. And sometimes it's very subtle. But that's what Joseph Campbell found out. And so the whole point is that if we look at the hero's journey and, we're going through a tough time, if you understand the hero's journey, you go, oh, I'm at 5 o'clock or I'm at 6 o'clock or whatever, which, you can put up that chart, and there's a video link I'll actually give you of a great animation that explains very simply the hero's journey. But the whole point is like you start just your normal, here's who I am today. And then you get the call to action, which is you get put on this unforeseen journey. And as you go, you meet obstacles along the way. You meet people, you meet a mentor guides you and things like this, which a mentor could be anything. It could be a person. It could be a book. It could be a video on YouTube. It could be anything, but it guides you through. And then, the most interesting part of the hero's journey is the death, where the hero dies. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical death. Most people, especially when they're writing screenplays, they have to die. They don't have to die physically. They die egotistically, mentally, spiritually, romantically. Like you think of, and we've all seen it, where the hero is this strong-willed, whatever, and this is how it has to be, and then everything falls apart, and they have to give up control. They have to give up their perception of the world. They have to give up something, and it's the death of some part of them. And in doing so, they find their new path, their new perspective, their new love of their life, their new whatever, you want to call it. And through that, they become the newest version of themselves. And so by the time you get back to 12 o'clock, which is the end of the journey, you're now a different person.
Right.
But guess what? Tomorrow you wake up and this version of yourself is the new status quo, and you start the journey over again.
When you think about the Hobbit is like the embodiment, because he actually goes on a journey as well. And then one of the things that happens a lot when we write for a motion picture is oftentimes when we empower a character in there, we start off by showing our character and their frailties. They don't recognize their power. They don't know their power yet. And somehow or another, through the journey that they take, they actually discover their power, which is part of what we're all experiencing right now, collectively and individually, is a sense of realizing that our power comes from within. And so the journey that we're on is part of that. And when I created this content, it occurred to me that if I look at the things that are going on in that sort of flattened view of what's going on around, then it's it's not a very peaceful, and it's not a holistic view of what's going on. But when I connect it to what has yet to come in our own evolution as a result of us taking this call to action, that's what excites me. And all of a sudden I feel peace and a sense of meaningfulness when I get up in the morning. And that's what I want to convey to other people through this work. Very often, because I do readings and sessions for people, very often people will come to me, and this is the interesting thing, is something in life didn't show up perfectly for them. And then when I point out that that's exactly the way the divine intended it to actually send you on that journey, suddenly something lifts off of them, and they have this, oh, now I have some answers, and guess what I can do now? I can actually do something with it once I connect this to that higher journey, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. But see, that's the perfect example, is that if you look at the hero's journey and how Joseph Campbell explains it, you realize multiple things. The number one thing is you realize it's really that whole thing where the sayings that we hear all the time, everything happens for a reason, or our struggles, or our, the things that didn't work out make us who we are. Because if you look at the hero's journey, he's saying, look, you go through all these different stages of conflict, of even, like in the trials in the approach area, when it's like, okay, we're going to take this person down and here's how we're going to do it. And then the plan doesn't work out, and then it all falls apart. So they're still trying to achieve it. And and then it falls apart. So like you say, is like, a good example is, what is it? Finding our power within ourselves. That's great. But there's a lot of them that, you find that it's he's the macho guy or tough woman or whatever it is that can take on the world. And by the end of it, they realize they can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
I was just watching a great classic movie, 48 Hours, with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, Nick Nolte's like, basically I can do everything by myself. And, he has to get Eddie Murphy involved, and they don't want to be together, but they have to help each other out to both get what they want. But by the end of it, the captain, the police captain, he's chewing out, both of them and everything. And Nick Nolte's like, let me tell you something. This guy, he's the best partner I've ever had, and I'd go to bat for him before anybody else. And the character comes full circle. So if you look at it and understand it, like who you wake up as today, if you step out into the world's going to challenge you. And whether you like it or not, you're going to change. Maybe for the better, maybe for not. It's all relative. But the whole point is you're not going to be the same person by this evening that you were when you woke up this morning. And that, to me, that's an exciting thing. But it really, if you understand, like you talked about, if you look at the world, it's very chaotic and all these other things. And especially if you're a sensitive person, that's very sensitive to energies and emotions and, that type of thing, it can feel like you're being bombarded. But if you sit there and go, and if you understand the cycle, you're like, I'm at this point. And if you go, hey, I'm going to die. Like a part of me is going to die. My perspective, my ideals, my ego, my money, whatever, something's going to die. But in it comes the new beginning. You talked about The Hobbit, which I haven't seen, but Lord of the Rings, and Gandalf the Grey physically dies in order for him to come back as Gandalf the White, right? Mm-hmm. I was watching, which is a great film, Wreck-It Ralph. And in Wreck-It Ralph, he's a tough guy who can, whatever, and, but he, at one point, like the whole time, he's just trying to win this gold medal the whole time so that people will love him and he'll be accepted. And by when his death comes along, he literally sacrifices himself for everybody else and forgets about himself as what, his medal and everything else. And in doing so, everybody loves him. Now he sacrifices himself, and he is saved by somebody else, but it was the sacrifice where he had to let go of everything he wanted. And this is where, people talk about the universe, like this, and this as an actor, Seph, like we sit there and we'll spend all year trying to book a job, right? And then November comes along, you go, you know what? I'm going home for the holidays. I'm done. I haven't booked a job. I haven't gotten an audition, whatever.
And then your agent calls you.
You booked the ticket and they're like, hey, guess what? And, and then same thing. Like I was going to cut all my hair back down to short because all my headshots are like that. And I'm booking like crazy all of a sudden. My hair person, she got sick. I was supposed to go on Saturday. She got sick and canceled on me. And then I got these big callbacks and everything else. I got booked on another job and they were like, don't cut your hair. We love it. And it's the whole thing of letting go is the same as the character dying in some way.
It's true. And this is why, and I know we're running out of time here a little bit, and I want to talk about ways that our audience can really tap into the benefits of how one can, first of all, well-being comes as a part of actually diving into the hero's journey and seeing how analogous it is to our own personal journey and having a greater level of faith and just really making this an enchanting adventure. And before we get to that point, and so I know we're running out of time, because one of the amazing things about bringing up the hero's journey is literally just to inspire people and to help people see that not only through story can we learn more about ourselves, not only through being the character in our own story, do we get to learn more about ourselves and thus fulfill our mission, as in each story is a hero with a mission, very often of some sort. Sometimes it's just to get the girl, but there is some sort of a mission, and we're on a mission as well, something that's way more meaningful than just getting up and eating, cereal and going to the gym. So the thing is that there's a lot that we can garner from taking a look at the hero's journey. And I know that you and I both use the hero's journey as a way of teaching people. I'd love to give our listener an ability to access what you do, because you also teach online courses where you go into the hero's journey a bit more. And so one would go to where to access your classes?
Yeah, if anybody wants to check out, I have an online course for, where I teach actors how to utilize the hero's journey and many other tools to apply to their acting, and which to me, acting and life imitates art imitates life, so they go hand in hand. So it actually, anybody can take it. It doesn't have to be an actor, and they'll benefit from it.
Right.
But it's at bookableconfidence.com, which
there's
we can share.
There's a free masterclass.
There's a free 1 hour masterclass where I explain and teach some of the tools in the course, and then they can check out the full course if they want to. It's online, available for them to take at their own speed and everything else. So,
nice.
But yeah.
And so this is the first episode, and at the end of each episode, I take a question from the audience. And since this is the first episode, I have a client base that I do, sessions and coaching with my gifts as an angel channel and intuitive. And so I fielded a really amazing question from Aaron, and let me just grab this question here because it's a really good one that's especially good for now. It says, I was recently let go from my job due to COVID and wish that I could I wish that I could do something more fulfilling. I haven't found anything yet, and I'm starting to get a little worried. What should I do? So for this person, and a lot of people will find the synchronicity in the message that I hear from the angels for this person is that this was meant to be. And even though it looks like you can't see what's ahead of you, and even though you can't see why it happened, and of course, sustenance and money is important to us. And so a lot of times we look at having lost that. I actually feel very strongly that this is about finding something that you really love to do. Now, for whatever reason, I feel that that's why this got taken away. Even if it's through the aegis of COVID taking it away, something universal had to come into your life and snatch that job out of your hands so that it would disrupt the complacency and that you could actually go on the journey to find something that really fills your life with meaning, fills your heart with your own infinite aspect. And as a result of that, your life makes so much more sense and is so much more of a joy to get up in the morning and live as you do this. So I feel that this was universally prescribed in this case. And I do feel that part of that, an equal part of that, is bringing you what comes next. And what I would tell you that I do get a message for you from the angels is that this is a time of personal expansion. So even though you have to put your resumes out, you have to do all that kind of good stuff, what I would say is that I really do get that you're being put in a space where personal expansion. So you can, if you can, put down the anxiety of not having a job for a little while. Do your thing, jump on your computer, your LinkedIn, and do what you need to do. And then afterwards, focus on your own personal expansion. That's going to create a flow of energy that's going to start to guide you and give you guidance about what to do next. And sometimes it'll even give you guidance about how to pay the bills or whatever you need to do until that shows up. So good luck, and then let us know how things are going. And if you would like to ask a question for the next show, just go ahead and send me your question to talktomyangels@gmail.com. That's talktomyangels@gmail.com. And I could feature your question on one of the podcasts. Also, if you want a personal session, you can go to my website, which is talktomyangels.com, where you can book a session if you have questions or need guidance from the angels as well. I want to say thank you to Brent. I know we could talk about this for a very long time, and I would love to have you back, possibly in another episode where we can expand on this, especially because of how valuable it is. But thank you so much for being my first guest and for sharing what you know. And I want to wish the audience, send a lot of love out to the audience, because everybody's going through a lot right now. And we want you to know that we're all in this with a lot of love with each other. And thank you very much.
Thank you for being part of the community. If you would like a personal angel session with Seph, or to receive messages from the angels by email, please visit www.talktomyangels.com. Connect with Seph on Instagram @TalkToMyAngels. Please share this podcast with others and subscribe so that together we can spread the messages from angels.